Alright, no funny intro this time. I got a lot to talk about. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Immortal Cave and sandwichtrust.blogspot.ca. As usual, put a link to my blog in the description. Now, because of last week, I had some technical errors. I couldn't get the the review up for Robot of Sherwood, so I'll be talking about that first before I get to listen. But I am going to mention this right now. Robot of Sherwood, really good episode. Out of the four I've seen so far, it's probably the worst, but that's still not saying much. Uh, it was a very good episode. It did rely on a lot of Doctor Who basics and even a lot of just storytelling basics, to the point where Clara was pretty much mimicking what the main villain was saying during a lot of it. It pretty much predicted what the plot was going to be. A couple of aliens showed up and convinced him to take over the world because they needed something out of it, and once they got it, they'd betray him. You know, we've seen that about 10 million times, especially in Doctor Who, so it's not surprising. Now, it's funny because if I had have gotten that review up last week, it would have made... let's just say there's a comment I'm going to say right now, which is, last week I thought that Doctor Who couldn't really get out of this rut it was in with certain episodes, where it couldn't quite come up with a lot of newer ideas. I mean, it had some, but it all kind of came down to basic adventure. They press the TARDIS random button and see what happens. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's one of the main basics of the series, and it's done it well for the last 51 years, and that's perfectly fine. But we've got an interesting thing here, because Robot of Sherwood, again, very good episode, a lot of very funny moments, very lighthearted, nice change of pace from the last two episodes beforehand. Had some problems. A couple of the plot points were really iffy, and while it looked cool, the climax was actually pretty stupid. But that's aside the point, because then we have Listen. How do I describe Listen? Jesus! What the... Wow! That was one hell of an episode. That was insane! In terms of concepts go, that might be one of my favorites, because not only does it progress the Doctor, not only does it progress Danny Pink as a character, who I'm starting to like more and more, not only does it progress Clara as this weird fairy godmother to the Doctor, as we saw at the end of Series 7 with the whole split into multiple parts, blah, 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 blah. And by the way, if anybody counts it as a spoiler, it's over a year old, so screw you. But, and yes, okay, I'll always put the spoiler thing in the top now, so frig it. This episode, wow. A lot of people thought Listen was just going to be a new Hyde from last year, which was the fourth episode of what I like to call Series 7. God damn, it's not a new Hyde, it's a new Midnight, is the thing. Like, except I would actually say it's a lot better than Midnight, to the point where I actually would say this is one of my favorite episodes, period. With one thing, which I'll get to later. Now, again, spoilers. I'm going to have it on the top, and like I said, I'm probably not going to mention it anymore because I'm just going to have it at the top, but... Oh, Lord. Where do I even start with this one? Yeah, it advances both Danny Pink and Clara because they meet up, and you kind of realize that they're destined to end up together because Clara meets Orson, who's like her great-grandson, who looks exactly like him, and he has Danny's little soldier figure who doesn't have a gun, and, all this. And it's a very... It's a little bit definite, but at the same time, I've never seen them do anything like that, so I'm not going to complain too much. Usually I try to stray away from things from too many, as Riverside would say, spoilers, but I'm not going to complain too much about, the whole future thing. But when it comes down to it, This was just a very good episode because the enemy in the episode, we don't even know if there is one. We don't even know if there was anything. And there's kind of evidence to both. It's such a cool concept for an episode because the Doctor's doing research. As this is one of the episodes I was looking forward to, by the way. And I'm cutting myself off, I realize, but this is one of the episodes I was looking forward to because one of the trailers that showed before Series 8 started was that one where he's sitting on top of the TARDIS and he says, "Listen." So there's an episode called "Listen." I got kind of curious. That's actually that trailer is the very first scene you see in this episode, and then he goes off into what I can say easily is the coolest start to any Doctor Who episode, period, where the Doctor is just kind of monologuing to himself, and he mentions, like, he's going on about, like, there are creatures that are meant to be the ultimate hunter, and they become the ultimate hunter because they evolve as the ultimate hunter. And there are creatures that have the ultimate defense because they evolve to have the ultimate defense. And we've discovered all of these creatures. But what if there was an ultimate hider? What if there was an ultimate creature that was great at hiding? And we didn't know about its existence because it's the ultimate hider. And then it's very interesting because he puts his piece of chalk, which, by the way, I'm going to get into the Doctor in a minute, what I think about him. Puts the piece of chalk down in his book. Looks away, like, just taunts them for a second. Looks back. Goes for his chalk. It's not there. Looks down, it's at his feet. Looks over at the chalkboard and says, "Listen." Number one, that's a very cool intro. I actually think that itself could have been like just the trailer that they used for the entire thing, and I would have been the happiest man alive because it showcases the Doctor perfectly. The 12th. It showcases him as a researcher, as a theorist, as somebody who's so very fascinated by science. Like, we always hear that the Doctor loves discovering new things, especially with the 11th. And the 11th is my favorite Doctor. Love him to death, but you don't really see him discovering things, like just going out to discover something. He's just kind of pushing the random button, spinning the giant roulette wheel, and seeing what happens. And, that works. Again, it's the basis of the show. But it doesn't really... You don't really see the Doctor being this clever genius that he always says he is. The 12th is the first Doctor where I can see it. Where I can see him being this genius, this clever, brilliant personality, this person who does all of this research and all of this stuff to learn these things. He doesn't just stumble upon them. Now, that worked for the 11th because he's just this... I believe Steve Moffat once called him, the 9th was a lion, the 9th was a tiger, the 10th was Tigger, and the 11th was a disorganized house cat who pretended like he didn't fall off the couch he just fell off of, or at least he meant to do it. That type of thing. And that was his thing. The 12th is more like he's always thinking, but he doesn't think about a lot of things on the side. When he, in the episode Into the Dalek, where he gives the guy the little radiation pill, and he follows it, we now know he wasn't so much that he wasn't thinking about the person dying. He was more thinking, this is the way we can do this. This is the smartest thing to do here. And that's what I kind of figured, but in this episode it kind of shows him perfectly. And it also shows kind of his ego in Robot of Sherwood as well, because it kind of shows when he's competing with Robin Hood. And it shows this very clever kind of thing to him, where he's very arrogant, he's very... I don't want to say self-centered, he's very... I just think arrogant is probably the best way to word it, where he always thinks that he's right, he always thinks that what he's doing is the best, but at the same time, you can kind of tell that he's working to get that. I love this Doctor because of that. He's easily my second favorite. Again, it's going to be hard to beat Matt Smith for me. But this character, I love this dude. Like, 4 episodes in and I already love the 12th. Let that be a sign. At the end of the season, I might be saying he's my favorite Doctor, but we've got a while to see that, and he's still got a hell of an uphill battle for that. But regardless, what I love about this episode is the fact that this thing that he's researching, he's trying to figure out, we don't know if it actually exists or not, because we never see any proof of it. There's some very eerie circumstances, but we never actually see evidence that it exists. Because everything they always come up with a plausible excuse for, and we never find out, is this actually a creature, or is this just coincidence? But at the end, and this is when I mentioned I didn't like something, it plays a little bit into this, but it's almost nitpicky, I want to say. Clara's been doing this thing where she puts her hand into the TARDIS and it kind of goes through her timeline. She thinks of a certain moment, and it goes there. First time she visited Danny as a kid, and she discovered that he has got a soldier that is broken because it doesn't have the gun, like a little soldier figurine, like one of those little green army men, like from Toy Story, actually. But it doesn't have a gun. It's supposed to have a gun, but it doesn't have a gun. Now, what's interesting about this is the fact that, again, later on, they find who we have to assume is Clara and Danny's great-grandson, named Orson, who still has the action figure saying it's a family heirloom. And he basically confirms that Clara is his great-grandmother. Now, there's a moment near the end that I think it goes a little too far, but at the same time, it's such a cool moment that I don't mind. Clara comes out of the TARDIS after she just did the mind meld thing, goes up and just like, can't see who's underneath the sheets, but there's a kid crying in like what looks like a barn. And ends up hiding underneath the bed because there's somebody comes up and then mentions like, he doesn't want to be a soldier, he doesn't want to hurt people. And I'm just like, okay, he's talking about Danny. And then they say something on the lines of, how is he ever suspected to be a Time Lord? And I kind of just went, oh, wow. This is a young version of the Doctor that's underneath the sheets. I'm just like, ooh. And then he's about to head out and accept him becoming a soldier. Clara grabs his foot, like they've been showing throughout the thing, and she kind of realizes, oh, I've kind of caused the Doctor to be fascinated by this happening. Oh. And then she kind of gives this one speech about don't being cruel, don't be, all these different things. And you kind of get the sense that this is how he became how he is. Now, I don't like the fact that they're turning Clara into Deus Ex. Like I said, I was going to say Deus Ex Machina, but or something clever in those lines, but screw that. Like I said, turning into the Doctor's fairy godmother. I don't like the fact that they're putting so much emphasis on her. Like, saving the Doctor's life millions of times, that's one thing. Being the reason he is how he is going a little far. Because I think that they're trying to put too much plot significance on her at once. And again, this is another thing. I think they should have waited for that. Expose that at the end, as well with the other stuff, where she saved the Doctor's life so many times. Because I personally think that it really did. It would have made that whole plot a lot more interesting, especially if they stretched it. Because she was the impossible girl. How has she died so many times? The end of season 7. Oh, that's why. And now she's just normal. Now, if they had done that in series 8, where we're suspecting that she's going to leave the show at the end of it, I don't think they've confirmed it, but it seems like all the signs are pointing to yes. Now, they've mentioned, I think twice so far in season 8, they've actually said something along the lines of, they've kind of mentioned death. Now, a friend of mine, actually, Lady K, I haven't mentioned her in a while, mentioned in series 7 they mentioned Christmas a few times, and during the Christmas special he regenerated. The doctor mentioned Christmas a couple times. Now, I'm pretty sure that does mean she's going to leave at the end of the series, and she's probably going to die. Because they've mentioned, like, her lifespan a couple times. Now, maybe that's going forward with her relationship with Danny, and her just kind of settling into a normal life. And if that's the case, cool. Or she might die, for all I know. But I'm really just... Again, I don't like the emphasis on it, especially considering the fact that, she plops down the soldier without a gun. And, that's all cool. My favorite moment, though, and again, this is my least favorite part of the episode, and it has a favorite part of it. Let that be known about how much I love this episode. She says something on the lines of, one of these days you're going to go back to this barn because you're scared. And it shows the war doctor. Like, it actually shows John Hurt from the anniversary walking up to that barn where he did the whole thing with the moment. And I was just like, oh, shit! It's all coming together! Like, again, I don't like the fact that they're putting this much emphasis on Clara, but at the same time, everything else kind of made the episode so much, so much awesome. I can't talk. It's that cool. It's how much, like, the cool concept for the episode. The very well done stuff with the doctor and with Clara, and even the mistake that, even the problem I had with Clara was still kind of neat. And, the stuff with Danny and the fact that there was this really cool concept behind it, and it had the coolest opening. I love this episode. I cannot state that enough. How friggin' good this episode is. Like, I don't know what the name of the next episode is, but it involves a bank heist and involves this alien. It might be like a prison heist, or it might be a vault heist, or I'm not quite sure. It flashed by in a couple seconds, and I was still kind of like, grr, after the end of that last one. So, I'm so blown away by this episode. This was so good. Like, I can tell you right now, it's my favorite episode of season 8. I'm gonna go by the rest of the episodes for a second. Series 7, I don't think it had anything quite this good. 6, I don't believe anything quite this good, at least. The opening two-parter was still excellent. Season 5, yeah, I would say it would probably be better than everything in that. The specials, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll declare it right now. This is probably my favorite episode of Doctor Who. And let that say a lot. Because, I've seen a little bit of the classic stuff, not much. It's a little beyond my reach, and I'll admit that it's my bias against it, because it hasn't aged that well in my eyes. That prevents me from really enjoying it. Not saying it's bad. Again, I think it is well done. It's just my bias. And I'll admit that gladly, But out of all since the series got revived, it's just this episode. It does everything right. Now again, watch me next week, or like at the end of series 8 when I'm doing a recap episode. Watch me say, well, in hindsight, it wasn't that good. Watch me say that. Or for all I know, the next episode might even be better. Who knows? But I love this episode. It's such a cool concept. It does so much for the plot and for the characters. I love it. You know, I've been going on for the last 20 minutes about how much I love this episode. I'm supposed to be reviewing 2 episodes. Again, Robot of Sherwood was a good episode, but it kind of showed in some ways that the show has aged. Again, it felt like an older episode. It felt like a classic series episode almost. Maybe that might just be my imagination, but meh. But it felt very good. It was a good episode. It was a very good episode, but it just compared to everything else I'd seen at that point, it wasn't that great. And when I saw that and I felt the show needs to do something to freshen up, it was like Stephen Moffat from on high went, well, here you go, and threw me, listen. I love this episode. I think I've said that about 1,000,000 times so far, so. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you next week for the next episode. I don't know what the title is. I'll probably look it up later. I don't know. Or I might just let that be a surprise. Friggin'. But no, this episode, if you watch this and you agree, comment, tell me why. If you watch this and you disagree, comment and tell me why. Because I'm very fascinated at just this. I love this episode, and I just want something. I want to talk about it. That sounds so strange. Like, just, if you've watched the entire video up to this point, leave a comment saying, like, if you liked the episode or if you didn't. For that matter, do that for all my videos. But this one in particular just fascinates me. And what it did for the Doctor, what it did for Clara, what it did for Danny, what it did for the series is just impressive. And I love it. Love, 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 love it. Anyway. Ahem. Ladies and gentlemen, I shall see you next week for whatever the hell the next episode is. Thank you very much. I can't seem to hit the stop button on this thing. I'm that frazzled and happy.